Hello and welcome to MySecurityTV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor with MySecurity Media, and this is our Tuesday afternoon episode. Today we're going to be crossing to Singapore and Canberra. Cybersecurity and data science AI is our subjects for today. First, we're going to be crossing to Singapore. Paul Hadji, the CEO and founder of Harangi Cybersecurity, and we're going to be looking at the working from home and a recent finding that they made, but everyone's been finding this as well, increased cybersecurity risks for particularly Southeast Asia, with him being in Singapore due to misconfigured cloud infrastructure. So be good to get across what Harangi's been doing. They've been around for about 6 years, so plenty to tell there. Then we're going to come back to Australia and head down to Canberra. Dr Alex Antic, the strategic data science expert, and also looking at AI, artificial intelligence, and what C-suite executives need to know. A good segue from last week where we spoke to Kashira Sagar on data science as well. So nice to stick to that theme. We cover off on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. We should be streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Welcome to Say Good Day and let us know where you're listening from. Particularly if you're interested in either of these fields, and you're welcome to ask questions along the way. And we'll release certainly these out as a Cybersecurity Weekly podcast. And we'll go for at least 45 minutes today for sure. Just to catch up on what we've been doing, we've got coming up on Friday morning, we're going to be speaking to Oleg Vornik, who's the CEO with Drone Shield, and having a look at their second quarter 21 records and the results. So it was quite a record result for them. And we'll look at the Drone Shield anti-drone solution. And then a catch-up from last Friday. We spoke to Lindsay Brown at LogMeIn, who's the Vice President for APJ, and looking at the university and education sector and why that's a cybercrime goldmine in relation to cyber attacks. Just a heads up on what we've got coming. We've got a CISO panel on August 10 at 2 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. We've got Alex Lazo, who's with Flybuys, their CISO, and Nick Savides, their Senior Director of Strategic Business at Force Point, and looking at data protection considerations during a security transformation project. And we're just bedding this one down. This is going to be on August 26 with Clarity. We've got Admiral Retired Michael Rogers and Lani Rafiti there with Clarity, just finalising our industry CISO, the pending, and also the Australian Cybersecurity Centre will be sending someone along, if not the CEO. So this is looking at government and private sector cybersecurity protection for critical infrastructure, and looking like that one's coming together nicely. Our Cybersecurity Weekly podcast is available. There's a new one coming out from Jane Lowe very shortly with a space sector interview up there in Singapore, and also launching, very pleased to be launching a new TV channel for MySecurity Media, and this is the MySecTV with Jess Bainbridge, who's going to be our new host and technology editor. And this aligns with our Smart Cities Tech channel. And we've also got another little brand there, Best in Tech, where we'll be looking at certain aspects of technology and giving them a badge when it actually works properly. And finally, I've got all the judging criteria done. All the scores are in. I'm yet to go through, but for the top women in security in the ASEAN region, Southeast Asia, this will be looking at like the August 17, I think thereabouts, will be the awards evening for that. But definitely over the next week or two, you'll hear more of that. Thank you very much to RSA and the Secure ID Suite for being our sponsor this month. And if you want to support the channel, welcome to go to MySecTV.shop and check out the merchandise and support the channel that way. So that's it from the marketplace and from me. And without further ado, Paul Hadji, the CEO and founder of Harangi Cybersecurity. Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me. Looking forward to having a chat today.
Good man. Thank you. It's a great background. It's the first comment I actually made, and I now know in Korean, Harangi means tiger, correct?
Yes. That's why I have all these tigers around me.
Very good. It's always nice to see, particularly speaking to a co-founder, obviously of a cybersecurity startup, and particularly one that's obviously put some thought into your branding and being the tiger. I know if Shemaine Tan was watching, we published her book and we chose the tiger as a cover, given the type of beast it is. rather than a lion. Maybe talk us into Harangi, where your roots came from, and then around the brand and what you've been trying to achieve over the last 6 years.
Yeah, I think like originally we started the company. I was actually still working at Grab as the CISO there, and we were doing it as a consulting business first. But our first customer was actually training incident response techniques to the Korean government through a program they call Best of the Best, which is essentially a school for graduates that are interested in cybersecurity and go through like a long training course. So that's kind of like where we got started, and we're talking with them about starting a company, and subsequently decided to name it Harangi because, of course, in Asia, tigers are the protector, and very fitting for a security company as well, with tiger teams and all this stuff.
Correct.
So decided to name it Harangi.
And obviously they have a bit of a stealth capacity too. You do a bit of red teaming and the like. Where did you actually make a start? You've got a SaaS platform, I believe, and we'll move into sort of the cloud infrastructure and configuration. But you've built this up over time. Where did you start? Because I think it's always a good story, even from Australian startups' perspective, in any startup. How did you go about it? Did you have partners as well?
Yeah, so myself and the other co-founder, Lee, who's also a very successful cybersecurity expert himself. Essentially, we started the idea around like when I was at Grab, trying to find a vendor that understood the cloud and cloud security. I couldn't find one in the region, so I ended up having to get one to help me from the US. And saw that as an opportunity to build a business around solving that problem. We started out as a services business. We still have a large part of our business is services. Essentially because of two things. One, we want to get close to the problem and understand what is the right thing to build. And we built a couple of things before finally sort of settling on the cloud security platform. And two, ultimately most of the big security companies actually start out as a services business because it's a very important way to build your brand and kind of work with large organizations to build a business. Of course, that made it difficult in terms of raising capital along the way because generally the venture capitalists don't like services businesses as much.
Yes.
But is what it is, and we managed to fight through it and raise venture capital anyways.
So you started services, and then you're obviously identifying what the customers were looking for. Did you have a customer or client work with you along the way that you were working with? I think that's often it leads to best success, isn't it? When you've got a customer that's prepared to back you a little bit and let you try out different things. Did you build the platform with a customer along on the journey?
Yeah, definitely. I think Gojek has been our customer since basically day one, and they're one of the bigger they are one of the biggest tech unicorns in the region. So I've been working with them very closely for about 5 years now, and very much helped us drive sort of the decisions we made around the product. Been a user of both our product and services for quite a long time as well, and a great partner in that.
With the backers of Gojek, isn't it? Gojek? Gojek. The backers, were they investing in you as well? Did you find that there's a commonality there with the investors?
Yeah, eventually some of the investors did invest in us, but it wasn't always the case. Definitely had them as a customer before we had any real investors. We got them as a customer before taking money from other investors that invested in them. Yeah,
and you obviously knew the sector quite well, but coming from Grab as well, so you knew what the requirements were, and you just need someone that you could grow with, right? Yeah, exactly. And before that, I was at Palantir as well, and spent quite a bit of time there working on both intelligence and cybersecurity problems. So I had the background sort of experience already, and then it was more about working on the business problems that both companies faced and helping them solve the security side of things. Yeah, well, look, maybe let's talk about the release that came out. I hadn't heard of Harangi until I got this, and this was a release that came out. Working from home could increase cybersecurity risks for Southeast Asian organisations due to misconfigured cloud infrastructure. And maybe this comes down to also you've recently been inducted by Singapore's Infocom Media Development Authority, or the IMDA, into the accreditation at SGD program, which I understand is a little bit like our IRAP program, where you don't get accredited. I think you get assessed, so maybe slightly different. Maybe talk us into the cloud infrastructure and what you're finding around misconfigurations. And at what level are you finding it? Is it sort of network level, or how applications are rolled out as well?
Yeah, I think so. We are a cloud security platform, and one of the main areas we focus is on cloud security posture management, which is a Gartner category that we're listed in. But essentially, what that means is we're looking at all the configurations of the cloud infrastructure that we're integrated with, and seeing what kind of maps to best practices in terms of security. And that's not only what we think is best practices, that's also like global and regional compliance standards. So in Singapore's case, we have MASTRM, which is the monetary regulation authority here, and help companies kind of make sure that they're in compliance with the regulations that MAS has. Same thing in Indonesia. We also have APRA for Australia, as well as HKMA for Hong Kong. So I think from that aspect, we're really looking at the configurations in terms of making sure two-factor authentication is enabled, making sure S3 buckets are encrypted, if it's storing sensitive data, those types of things. And there's over 400 rules now that basically is run in their infrastructure to understand whether they're compliant with security best practices or not. We also provide a vulnerability management layer, which allows them to sort of say whether things are false positive, false negative, or saying whether those risks are accepted, for example, because of course there are some reasons why you would want certain things to be in place, even if it looks like a misconfiguration from a security standpoint. So yeah, really focused on that layer. And with the identity and access management side of things, looking more at the users and ensuring that users have sort of least privilege in terms of their access to the cloud infrastructure, and making sure like key rotation and things like that is happening as well.
This is a SaaS platform, so they have to sort of sign up to this. It's not like an agent going out. This is a set of rules that are they ticking off, or is it automated as well? How does it actually work? Because as you say, 400 odd rules. My head's dizzy already. With people with a real job having to make sure that they match all of that. What's the platform? What's the sort of secret sauce there?
Yeah, so basically we take a read-only IAM role into their cloud infrastructure. So we work, it's already integrated with AWS, GCP, and Azure, and Ali Cloud, and Huawei Cloud will launch this quarter. But essentially what we're doing is looking at the configurations against a rule set and providing the pass and fails in the UI for the user toolcat. We also have a feature that was released earlier this year called Click Remediation. So for your case of like, oh, hey, I need to fix this, it's a lot of stuff to fix. There's actually a button where you can just like run a Lambda function or a coordinated function in the other cloud service providers and fix the issue. So I think from that aspect, we do make it quite easy for the users and whoever has access to the cloud infrastructure management to fix the issues, as well as actually, maybe they don't feel comfortable sort of giving permissions to do that. We give the directions on how to do it. So step-by-step instructions, either through the UI or through the CLI, and giving like Terraform code snippets for them to integrate into their platform to fix the issues.
So as you say, it's read-only. So you're kind of just taking what their architecture is, and then maybe you run a scan over that in terms of, are they complying with certain? And I take it does the platforms themselves, they're aligned with this. They have APIs for this now that allow you to build those tools to match from a compliance and governance perspective.
Yep. We're actually just using a security audit account in most of those cases to do this. And I think a lot of the value comes from making it easy to solve these issues and keeping on top of it, right? Because like you can run a scan anytime, but running it every day or anytime there's a change made in our case, and notifying the organization via Slack or email that a change has been made, that maybe a security issue, you should look at it. It's quite important in terms of the process of them sort of keeping secure and fixing things in a meaningful time frame. So we kind of enable them to do that, as well as track it all. So there's historical records of what's happened, who's done the change, so it can be fixed, which allows the organization to improve in terms of their security posture over time. Yep. And
are you working? Yeah, are you working with MSPs, or are you tend to work directly with the client?
I think it depends on the size of the business. Some organizations do choose to use MSSPs, and we have a lot of MSSP partners that use our product to secure their customers' cloud infrastructure, and the MSSP ends up being our customer. But a lot of times we go direct as well. I think it really depends on the maturity and sort of like what industry they're in as well. So if you're a fintech, generally they're going to manage it themselves. But if you're in a less sort of regulated industry, a lot of times they'll use an MSSP.
Yeah. So the question was, you've got MSPs within your portfolio, in other words, yeah.
Yes, we do.
Now you mentioned pre-interview, you've got about 100 staff, 70 there in Singapore. How quick has that growth been? And maybe that'll be sort of a good insight into the cybersecurity landscape there in Singapore. We hear a lot about skills and a demand on skills. So it sounds like business has been healthy. Has that been a sort of a consistent degree of growth for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think COVID was last year. COVID was difficult for everyone, and no one knew kind of
Yep.
how it would affect the industry. Ultimately, we weren't as affected as we thought. So in 2020, we were about 65 people. 2021, we grew about 50% already.
Nice.
So I think that's been a good sign and somewhat reflective of how resilient our business was during COVID. 2019, I think we were a little bit less than 50 people. In 2018, I think
Wow.
around 20. So pretty rapid growth, but not the type of growth that you would see in a B2C business for sure, but rapid for B2B.
Yeah, very good. And that was a bit of a question there in terms of, is the growth coming from your platform and the SaaS, because obviously that's great growth, because that's that's what the businesses obviously seem to be designed for, or is it more on your services side with the likes of working from home and they need to do pen testing and a bit more accreditation on that side? Yeah, which side of the growth is there in terms of what the clients are needing?
Yeah, so I'll speak to 2021 because otherwise it gets a bit complicated. But in 2021, both businesses are growing. Services is growing at quite a good rate. The product is growing significantly faster, but from a lower base, because we did start the services business first. And ultimately, like when you look at a services and product business, one is clearly more scalable in the long run, versus of course the product business. So that one will eventually outscale the services business. But we always feel and continue to sort of prove that the services side of the business is an important part of building a strong product company because of the research and development efforts that are necessary, and specifically in cybersecurity and really in all of technology, in my opinion.
And again, from the services side, what kind of services are you finding? Are you in what sort of industry verticals that you are kind of strongest in?
Yeah, so I think regulated industries in Singapore's and really the region's case is always going to be a focus, because they're required to do things like penetration testing and compliance work. But the tech industry as well, even companies that aren't regulated are starting to feel pushback from consumers on sort of investing in security and making it part of their branding and kind of marketing efforts as well. Because more and more companies are starting to see like how serious it can be if there's a large data loss, and Singapore government has done a good job of kind of communicating with these companies and talking about the fines that the potential of fines that could be there if data is lost or if data is handled incorrectly. So I think the community is starting to take cybersecurity much more seriously, and I've seen quite a bit of growth in the past, I guess, 8 or 9 years that I've been here.
You think the legislation's working now? Like they needed legislation to make cybersecurity get up to that board level and them start to take it seriously?
I think there's two things that drive cybersecurity like growth and sales, is like regulation and fear. I think we're kind of in the middle of both of those.
Or the fear of regulation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true as well. Like, I mean, in both cases, they really do drive cybersecurity spending, and I think ultimately makes the organizations and governments more secure. Because and right now, I think we're kind of in the timing of where both are kind of hitting. Like the regulation is becoming more pronounced. People are talking about it more. There's more punishment in terms of the companies that don't do their sort of requirements in terms of security. And then the fear is also happening because there's plenty of breaches going on around the world, and they're much more publicized than they were 3 to 5 years ago.
And Southeast Asia, for you, you've obviously focused there in Singapore. You've mentioned Korea. You've got other staff in Korea. How spread out are you across the ASEAN region?
Yeah, I would say the majority of our workforce is in Singapore, with Indonesia being the second biggest office. And then we kind of have people spread around in different parts like Hong Kong, Philippines, and US as well. But I think we'll continue to grow that effort, especially as now we're kind of a remote company, regardless of where people are at. I think that's a conceded effort for us, is to really hire the best talent, regardless of location, within certain time zone restrictions. I think we will keep that in place.
How is the Indonesian market? That's an interesting one, and I think our Australian listeners and audience will take interest in this, because there's obviously Australian startups that look towards Singapore from their product as well. So Singapore's a bit of a given, but Indonesia, maybe Thailand, how do you find moving in? There can be difficult markets to get into, but once you're quite there, are you finding growth? Or how long have you been in Indonesia?
We've been in Indonesia for basically ever since we started working with
Gojek, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've had a positive experience. I think, in our case, like, we had like pretty much the best anchor client you could have going into that market. So that really helped. And anytime we enter to new market, I always recommend that you have an anchor
everyone
client.
Everyone knows the brand, right? So
yeah,
it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And in my case as well, and how we kind of think about new markets is by finding an anchor client first. So someone that you can kind of use as the client to help you sort of spread either brand name or sort of reputation wise. So in our case, it's been great. And it's a huge market for us, and something that we will continue to invest in and grow.
What about skills and language issues there? Much on skills?
I think there's a lot of skills and talent. I mean, definitely, you have to do quite a bit of interviewing and finding the right people, but we've always been able to find the talent that we have. Our team is about 30 people, so it's scaled pretty big and not huge, but we're continuing to grow and continuing to hire there. So I think the talent is there. There's some level of language, but like our whole team speaks English. And some of that has been like on the job training in terms of getting up to a certain level, because of course the rest of the company is speaking English. But in general, I think it's been quite good. And normally I'm there every other week, but haven't been able to go for the past year and a half.
What a shame. But and what about the maturity of the market? Because again, Southeast Asia, you look at the 10 nations of ASEAN, you've got everything from sort of Myanmar, although we found Cambodia, growing quite quickly as well. But the maturity across the market in comparison to Singapore. Yeah, I think from the enterprise perspective.
Yeah, Singapore is by far like the most mature. I think Indonesia and Thailand, in my opinion, are quite close in the bigger companies. I think once you kind of go down from the bigger companies, it starts to deteriorate a bit. But with the bigger companies and a lot of the tech companies, because they're utilizing the cloud and they're more forward, I think on the security front, they are spending, and they're also taking it quite seriously. We see a lot of conceded like sort of interest in solving their security problems. But like you do have other troubles there, like procurement is quite different. Like in a lot of cases, you're doing business in their local currency, language. Some companies like won't do contracts in English, things like that. So like there is hurdles. Don't get me wrong. But ultimately, I think like the markets are worthwhile in entering. Now, if you're coming from Australia, there may be other markets you want to enter in first, but Indonesia is 260 million people, so it's much bigger than Australia, and almost as big as the US, right? So I think it's it's quite a big market, and it's growing extremely fast. I think that is something that's important to get in earlier rather than later.
I think you're spot on, and I also think we underestimate the sophistication up there as well. Again, the moment you started talking about Thailand, I think Bangkok. There's a lot of head offices in Bangkok for global companies anyway, and they uplift everyone around them. Now, we had promised to do the misconfigured cloud infrastructure. We might get back on the topic. Sorry, business is always an interest to me. What are the common issues that you do find? Where do you think companies struggle from? Is it the overlay of regulations and compliance? Because as you say, there's 400 sort of rules there, that's a challenge for any company? Or is it just the speed of sort of the transformation that they've been under to cloud? Where do you think some of the key misconfigurations are, and some of the sort of areas that companies should be focusing on along their sort of transformation?
Yeah, I think no different than the traditional environments. Like patching is really one of the major problems. Like when you're kind of running a more traditional network and keeping all your systems up to date, like the cloud service providers have taken care of a large portion of that. But in doing that, there's a lot of configurations that you can make to customize your cloud infrastructure. And of course, like they need the freedom of making those configurations in a way where you can do almost anything you want, right?
Yeah.
And then like let's say you have 30 developers building an application in a tech company context, or maybe 10 IT people managing this. It's a lot of people that can make mistakes and sort of misconfigurations and going on. And like just like with like your traditional IT infrastructure environment, you have something that kind of ensures that all the patching and configurations of the laptops and the images are done correctly. It's kind of like what we're doing, but for the cloud infrastructure, it's just like it's different thing we're looking at, and we're looking at the configurations of how things are configured in the cloud infrastructure. So I think access is one of the biggest and most important things. So making sure that people have the least privilege access to what they need to have access to, and not everything. Making sure when you're integrating third-party products and services through APIs or whatnot, they have least privilege access as well. Because a lot of breaches in the cloud have to do with like third-party vendors getting breached and then subsequently having too much access in someone else's cloud infrastructure, which can cause quite a bit of issues, as you can imagine. And then really like just the basics in terms of 30 people working in an environment, changing things on a day-to-day basis. Someone's going to make a mistake. As much as you can teach people, we will make mistakes, and something needs to be monitoring that to sort of ensure that the configurations, are being done correctly. And like our product allows you to customize it too. So if there's certain standards you have internally, then you can kind of build those in or turn rules on and off based upon your preferences. And then you need that kind of loop of we do these as best practices, but we need a check in place that's going to ensure that we don't make a mistake, essentially. And then if we do make a mistake, it alerts us. We can quickly fix it, quickly identify and fix it. So I think for us, identifying, fixing, and complying with the standards is really important.
And probably refixing too. It's like, we only fixed that last week. Why is that sort of broken again? Or who opened that? And I suppose that's the biggest thing, isn't it? You got to assume that there's a misconfiguration there somewhere, and it does become a full-time job, hence why you're in business, I take it. Is that you never do an audit and never have a finding? Is that where you find you tend to come on with new clients? You still have to do an assessment. You do a sense of a sort of a hygiene audit, and then you apply your tools over the top of that to look at for future changes and rule changes?
Yeah, so essentially, with our product, we do a 2-week free trial, and part of the installation process is basically doing the first scan, and then it gives them a report. And we've never had anyone. Only 2 customers have not had a critical issue, which is like kind of help them identify that there's a need for this, regardless of how good we train our people and what we have in place. It's quite important to have something in place to do this. And then like we have a trend line too. So what we want to see is kind of like the customers, they install it, find security issues, and then over time, like they gradually are seeing less and less, and the sort of time to fix is getting faster and faster, right? And that's kind of like the metric that any CISO is going to want to be able to report to their board, is that like, of course issues happen, but when they happen, we can fix them in, hopefully it's like 24 hours for critical issues, but depending on the organization and the size, like it may be different, but we enable them to kind of track that stuff and work within the organization to fix those problems, and integrate with their developer and IT tools as well, because that's really important as well, is to become part of the process, not create a new one.
Well, the other thing is business is always changing. It's not like they're ever going to stay the same. Go, yep, we've got it right. That's it. We'll just stay it there. There's always something new going on. It's a good business to be in, I imagine. Look, Paul, that's right on time, mate. And I've had probably about 4 or 5 other questions. So hopefully we'll be able to get you back into the future. It has been an interesting time. Singapore, you're in restriction at the moment, but maybe not full lockdown like us here in Sydney, but Melbourne, Adelaide's coming out. What's the current situation in Singapore?
Yeah, we're in, they call it phase 2, but essentially, restaurants are closed. You're supposed to work from home, of course, but you can still go outside and go for runs and meet people in groups of 2. But not many places to go, considering all the restaurants and casual places are closed, at least physically. But of course, there's takeout available, and you can meet at each other's houses.
And how long's that been going on for? Is that relatively new again?
Yeah, I think they started it just last Thursday, so about a week now, because there was another small outbreak. But the vaccination rate is significantly high here. It's like 60% now. So I think very quickly we'll be back into somewhat of normalcy, which is good.
Beautiful. Well, fingers crossed for that. Well, look, Paul Hadji, the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder with Harangi Cybersecurity there in Singapore. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you joining us on our Tech and Sec Weekly.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good day.
Good on you, mate. I'll let you go, and I'll put you backstage. So very good, and no questions from the audience. Thank you very much for that. I think there's a few people, and we're on LinkedIn again today, which is good. Let me just get my captions over. And straight into data science off there. Please welcome Dr. Alex Antic, strategic data science expert. Artificial intelligence, what C-suite executives need to know. Alex, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, Chris.
Good on you. And I'll just get rid of that. Data science, it's a great area, and it sounds like you've got not so much the best job in the world. It's not really a real job. You're just a strategic data science thinker, I imagine. So maybe a bit of an overview of what current work you're doing, and hopefully that'll inspire a few of the audience to look more closely at this. And then we'll look at what the executives in the C-suite should be asking of someone like you with your skills.
Sure. So the main work I do is, I guess, spread over three areas. One is the consulting arm, working with organizations, both public and private, but also in the startup phase and academia, trying to help them align technology, especially around AI and data science, to their strategic goals. There's also advisory work. It's aligned with that, but also sitting on various advisory boards, helping the C-suite and boards understand how does AI apply to their own space? What are some insights and tips they need to know to be able to develop that capability or scale the capability internally? And how to make sure that they're investing the right, the right thought and the right capability into AI ethics and everything associated with that, which has become big news lately.
Yeah. And
the third part is really around keynotes, training, things like that. Just going out and speaking.
Awareness.
Exactly. Awareness and my passion for AI and data science, and helping others understand how to get into the field, how to grow their careers, and organizations. What do they need to know to build up their capability and to scale the capability for themselves, especially in relation to different sectors and domains?
Well, we followed on from Kashira last week, and he's also an awarded analyst. You're also one of the top. Is it the top 10? How do they do it? This is through the Australian Computer Society. You're a top 10 analyst. Maybe just talk us into that.
Sure. So it's the Institute of Analytics Professionals Australia. Kashira's a fantastic guy. You're very lucky to have him on board. He's one of my peers in that accolade. I think we're very, very lucky to be acknowledged for the work we're doing, especially around promoting data science and analytics throughout Australia. It's a real honour and privilege to be in a position to be able to go out there and speak to people about what AI and data science means to us, to get younger folk involved in trying to grow their interest in trying to build up our capability within Australia. Long term, we definitely need to invest more in that. And in terms of helping organizations better understand the truth behind how to actually use AI, what does it mean for them? So it's just a great position to be in, to be able to speak to people about all those different facets and how they can make the most of it.
How do you find the language? Because I noticed you're talking more on AI, and obviously that was one of the topics today. But do you find the data science discussion moves into the machine learning and AI and the automation and the predictive nature of data and trying to make it smart? Because at Kashira and we, if anyone's listening from DITNO, so I don't know if you know DITNO, it's a cybersecurity company, but DITNO stands for Data is the New Oil. So they actually named the company off that. So I did chuckle when Kashira mentioned that. Do you find that's driven your passion into the machine learning, AI, automation from the data itself? Where's your where was your sweet spot when you thought, no, I'm going to focus more on the AI end of the spectrum?
So if we go back quite a number of years now,
Okay.
having studied mathematics and computer science at university was, I think, a natural progression to move into the broader field of data science, and then from there into what we know as AI these days. I tend to use the terms rather loosely and interchangeably and synonymously, even though I tried not to in the past, but given the way various clients and people I speak to tend to talk about it, I thought it'd be just easier to stick to either data science or AI, depending on what they're trying to do and the language they use. They all mean the same thing. They all want to know, how do we use our data to better inform our decision making. They want to provide data-driven, evidence-based support for decision making. So sometimes it's AI that is what we call AI these days. But then we can get into a whole philosophical argument about what is AI versus artificial general intelligence versus other facets related to that. So I tend to keep it quite broad initially when I'm speaking with people, and then I'll narrow down to what specifically is needed for them. I don't always profess that AI or data science will be a solution for their needs. It could be a policy issue or people problem that they're facing. It's about trying to identify what is the problem, and then if there is a data-driven problem to solve it, then talking to them about what are the metrics we need to use to develop some sort of success measure. What does success look like for you? Then how do we go about doing that? And always just focusing on the strategic outcomes, and then worrying about the technology later. It's just a means to an end.
I think that's the other thing, sort of the topic I grabbed, and you've got a list on your website, and we'll put that in the show notes in terms of anyone who wants to reach out to you more directly as well. But what executives need to know, and this is something we touched on with Kashira on the data literacy and being data literate, and why that is important, versus say someone building like sort of driverless cars, where they're trying to learn how to collect data and how to train an AI related training. Do you find you're more on the business side? Okay, we're a business, we need to be making decisions better, and we need to kind of get an understanding of where our data is and how we can sort of use it better? Or do you also have projects that are more sort of forward thinking, where they're applying data science and creating structured data in the data sets as they create it? Where do you find the two?
Great point. How much time do we have? So
we got all day. No.
I wish. You're right. There are in some ways two extremes. A lot of people could approach someone like me and say, we need to use AI to solve some problem or develop some capability. So they have this preconceived notion that AI is the solution, and that they have similar problems to other organizations. What they don't tend to realize is that AI, in terms of what they're thinking of and how most people use it from the vendor space, they're using neural networks or deep learning in some capacity, doesn't necessarily apply to them, because they don't have the huge volumes of data or the needs that, say, a large tech giant will have, and they don't have the, say, capability or infrastructure to support some high-end or deep learning capability, and they don't need it. Sometimes what they need is a relatively simple machine learning or traditional analytical approach to simply automate something they're doing, or to do a classification or a regression or whatever the technology is to drive a certain outcome that they're after. And then they don't also realize typically the state of their data or the state of their capability more broadly. They don't realize that there's lack of connectivity between data from one disparate system to another, a disconnect between what people understand from, say, a business perspective versus a technical perspective. So often I feel like I'm acting like a linchpin, trying to connect people up internally, trying to help them understand what are the business problems, how can technology come and play a role in that, and how to get different people talking. So when people ask me in that case, so what is the definition, your definition of data science or AI? For me, it's really about being the science of change. It tends to be a change management process or a transformational change process internally for organizations that are developing this capability versus those that are scaling it up. So it very much comes down to the people side for me. It's about having the right people and the right culture to support it, having the right communications, I guess, capability internally so people can talk and share ideas. And then there's the technology part. I kind of rate that lower down, because it's just a means to an end, as I mentioned earlier. I'm quite agnostic to the technology they use. It's really about how do you get the right culture and the right mindset in place to allow all that to actually be successful. If you don't have the right people or the right, I guess, thought process around wanting to be data-driven and evidence-based with your decision-making, then it doesn't matter how many millions you spend on your infrastructure and how many data scientists you employ. You won't really have a downflow effect. So that's something I come up often. Yeah.
I think this is a real area of interest to me. I'm a former investigator, and I think when you have an investigative mindset, you are just asking the questions, and then it's about finding the answer or where that answer might be. And likewise, it resonates with me. I would do like an organisation security audit, and so I think about the whole organisation. A lot of audits are done with a very silo mentality. And you say, no, well, I want to go talk to that person over there and find out what they're doing. Like, oh, no, we don't talk to them. Or, no, what do you want to go talk to them for? And when you add that in, it adds a bit more context. And I think that's maybe something else that will be relevant to your discussions as well. Is might be fun to have the data, but what's the context of that? And then does that context change the context of the other data? I suppose... Does a good case study come to mind for you where getting beyond the silo mentality for data science in an organisation? Is there a sort of a sweet spot for you in terms of the silos? Because that's how particularly government is formed. But businesses, we hear a lot about the agile and that type of approach, but everyone still has their little job to do, and they can have their blinkers on. Do you have a case study in mind that sort of explains how silos can be broken down?
Sure, that's a great question. And just touching on something you mentioned earlier, often I find the best thing to do initially is to kind of do a data analytics assessment or maturity assessment to begin with, to understand
there you go.
What level they're at, and then trying to show them how to progress that and where some rope blockers lie. And a part of that, those blockers tend to be silos or internal barriers. And there was a case recently working with an organization where they really wanted to invest in the capability of AI. They didn't know what specifically, but they're honest and said, look, we think there's elements of AI that can be used to increase our capability, improve efficiencies, and target things we're looking at, such as fraud detection in the space that they work in.
Yeah.
And I started off by doing an initial assessment, trying to understand who holds different data sets, what are some of the issues around it, say duplicate records, and other inefficiency around how their data was stored and how to get the systems talking together. And then from there, looking at what capabilities are quite realistic for them, given their funding and time constraints, to actually try and implement a solution. And then from there, it's helping them to initially doing proof of concepts, showing them what from a small investment perspective, what can they actually look to realistically achieve. What are some of the outcomes and metrics we'll be looking for. And then beyond that was a piece around executive training. So often it's around trying to educate, the board members or senior executives, like you said earlier, Shira mentioned around data literacy and data fluency, helping them understand how can they better not only understand the results that they're getting from their technical leaders in data science and AI, but what questions can they ask to validate and prompt them to do further work or to better align those capabilities to their strategic goals. What's keeping them awake at night? What do they see as some of the rope blockers? And then hopefully they can ask questions to better inform solutions to mitigate those risks and other issues. So it's very much about collaborating with people. I always look at it as a collaborative aspect of working with different people, different groups, and really bringing the business and technical worlds together to try and solve overarching problems that are inherent to the whole organization. Because as employees of that organization, they're all after the one goal. They're all trying to serve the one purpose. So it's just about helping people communicate and being able to speak, both the business language and the technical language really helps in that regard. So it's something skills I'm always leveraging.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities in your language to cybersecurity as well, and where the two are heading. Again, cybersecurity had to change its language, and sometimes you might sort of stick to certain language based on the audience and the like. But then also getting up to the C-suite. And Kashira touched on that again. I'm sorry to keep going back to Kashira, but there is similarities there. But he now has a C-suite role. Who do you find is coming to you? Is it obviously much higher than, say, a business analyst? But are you talking to the board and the executives a lot more now? And you've been around for a little while, so you're seeing that progress. And those questions are getting more sophisticated, or do you think executives have still got quite some way to go before their literacy improves and gets to a reasonable framework?
You're right. There's a lot of variation in some organisations. Where they have, say, a CIO or CDO, their questions to me are much more informed in terms of, we kind of understand broadly what we're trying to do, but we may not have the requisite technical skills. How can you help us build up this capability? How can you help us, I guess, influence the rest of the board or the rest of our, senior executives to better understand what we know is true, but we'd like an independent expert to come in and kind of just help inform them about what is needed to be done in our organisation. That could be through a training program or advisory capacity or whatever the need is. On the other hand, you've got organisations which are trying to establish their capability in those positions, but don't really know where to begin. They don't know how to get the right people involved or what infrastructure they should invest in. So it's kind of like, all right, we're starting from effectively a greenfield solution. We know we need to invest in this. Where do we begin? How do we get some independent advice or someone to come in and do just a proof of concept or a large scale project sometimes, so we can build up this capability? And I do that in various domains. It could be in the federal government space across like health, in intelligence space, social services in some broader capacity. Could be investment banking, retail. I've done some work in cyber as well. So the questions tend to be quite common across all those organisations. But the maturity level in terms of their understanding of data does vary quite a bit. Some of them are influenced by stuff they've seen online or they've had a vendor pitch to them, and it can be very one-sided, obviously, and that's understandable. So they try and obtain more of a balanced view, and so they can make up their own mind in terms of where to go next.
Yeah, the validation was another key word that you mentioned there, is validating data, and having more than one data source is always another important aspect. How do you find the pipeline at the moment? Because again, maybe bringing back the cybersecurity analogy to where data science is, there must be a lot of opportunity. Are you seeing opportunities there for business, from a startup perspective or a SaaS platform, from yourself or others in the industry, of going, wow, this is definitely going to be a bit of a boom period for the next 10 years as this grows? And then the pipeline of data scientists coming through. I mentioned we're working with a data scientist a couple of days a week, just on websites. Just pulling in data from an audience and what people are looking at and what's popular. It's once you're on the journey, we'll sort of advocate. Once you're on that sort of data journey, the data literacy journey, it's addictive, because there's the next one. You might solve one problem, but then there's the next one, and it's very rewarding. There's sort of three questions there. Sorry, Alex, but first one, the pipeline of data scientists. The second one is the potential business opportunities here for data scientists as they come through. And then obviously the rewards that business people should be looking for from that. So maybe the pipeline, you're formerly ANU as well, right? So you must have some good insights there.
From a career perspective, in terms of where the career is going, I think there'll be growth, that's unabated growth in the next 5 to 10 years easily. So when I was head of data science at the ANU, I was seeing a lot of huge interest from students, both coming from the school level. This is their first degree, they're wanting to learn data science and associated technologies such as software engineering, but also people reskilling, working professionals who want to understand either how do I become a data scientist. I've worked in another field. This is something I'm really interested in. I love problem solving. I love working with data. I want to retrain. Or people that manage these capabilities and say, I've got a few data scientists and software engineers in my team. I want to better understand what they're doing, and so I can be a better leader for them. And that's fantastic to see. So I think the growth will continue in data science and data engineering, software engineering. I think there's going to be a lot more growth in the software engineering part in the next few years. So from a career perspective, I think it's fantastic. I mean, if you like data and working with models and coding, I can't think of a better career to have. But I am biased, obviously. So there's huge potential, and for people to retrain, I think it's a great opportunity to do that.
And what about the business and sort of the startup business tools? We talked to Harangi Cybersecurity there, who's come up with a SaaS platform looking at sort of compliance rules. We've been working in Azure, and there's the Tableaus, and there's a whole bunch of analytical sort of platforms there. Do you think we're going to see more of those, or those are the fundamental tools that you'll use? And there's not so much the innovation in data science, it's more the data scientists pulling that data and using the tools. Does that make sense in terms of the question? Do you think we're going to see innovation in data science from data scientists?
I think so. And I think what will happen is there'll be this continued commoditization of data science and products. So you'll see a lot more, I guess, automation of some of the things that data scientists do. So I think an important area to focus on will be on the human side of things that you can't easily automate or programming or hard code in some way. And that's where I think people will be able to add the most value as more the mundane and rudimentary tasks are automated and created as a service product. I think then the true value in data scientists will be, how to ask the right questions, how to then, not just solve the problem, which will be a bit more easier with the technology that'll be available, but then how to use those learnings to better inform other questions and then to kind of develop consistent and responsible end-to-end systems from data ingestion to model development to productionizing, and then to looking at monitoring the outcome on say society or the end user client. So I think
then you sell that. Then you sell the end result of that, don't you? Yeah, right. And I think we've got Clio Space coming up in a couple of weeks. The space sector. If you're there in Canberra, are you hearing much more about space and the potential data pipeline from space and how that can be commercialized and commoditized?
Yeah, more from in the sense of investment being made in that space, pun intended, and also use of data and how to better leverage further exploration and investment to how it feeds into other domains such as agriculture, the drones industry, and just the broad spectrum of ways that it benefits society at large. So I think there'll be a lot more that'll come out of that in coming years, and that's a really exciting area to work in, I believe. Yeah, definitely some big time investors in that space.
And I suppose let's finish off, given the time, is the point of singularity has been changing around in terms of AI. How confident are you that AI will continue to develop and ultimately we'll get to that point of singularity? Are you where do you sit on the fence in relation to that? Are we going to get there one day, or it's just not going to happen, and it's only going to get as smart as a dumb monkey?
That's right. I hope possibly. I'm not entirely convinced at the moment. I think AI, no matter how powerful and awesome it is at the moment, it excels in certain domains. It's very much curve fitting on a large scale, albeit with very, very important implications, especially around image recognition and natural language processing. There's things that it can do that were unforeseen even a year or two ago.
Right.
In terms of achieving, like say, artificial general intelligence, being able to incorporate abstraction and reasoning and intelligence in a human sense, I don't see that in the foreseeable future. I think it's way too complex and something that will need a complete paradigm shift in terms of how we do that. I don't think deep learning will be the answer. So when people get scared about killer robots and they think that self-driving cars are around the corner, I don't quite see it that way. I think the biggest issues for us immediately, let alone around the corner, are in relation to responsible use of AI, ethics, bias, fairness, and those notions. Things that we're at a pivotal point in society and in history to actually try and address those immediately. So I think that's what we need to get on top of, rather than allow AI technology to scale a lot of these ethical and moral issues, and for us to be able to kind of hide behind our moral like objectives in some ways. When people say, oh, AI system, rule to that he wasn't a human, so you can't blame us as an organization. So I think more effort needs to be placed in AI ethics more broadly.
Yeah, there's a lot of research capability there, but unfortunately, I'm always an optimistic pessimist. Unfortunately, so it's not going to take too long before someone's going to, as long as it can be automated, put a gun in its hand and let's automate it. That's how someone's going to eventually think. But it's also that black box of AI as well, where it might be very clever and it might be solving a problem, but we don't know how it's doing it. That can also be just as dangerous, right?
Well, that's something I'm asked about regularly, is about this whole notion of explainability. And I think some people underestimate the complexity in that. The first question you ask is, how do you define explainability? Explainable to whom? Is it to a regulator, to an engineer trying to debug the system, to an end user, to a decision maker? I mean, and how do you then mathematically formulate your notion of fairness and what you're trying to explain into a algorithm? I mean, there are a lot of complications there. There's some great work being done to address that, but it's far from a solved issue, and it's far from being consistent in terms of how people interpret that throughout the industry. And
is that what you are intending to do? Is just remain, and I'm just looking at your title here, Strategic Data Science Expert. You're happy in this is a nice spot for you because you can sort of deal with a whole bunch of different cases at the same time, rather than say Kashira, who's using his role as a chief data scientist, a chief data officer. Your role, I'm a consultant, so it sounds like it's a good job to have. Or do you find you're going to sort of focus on one particular area and follow that on?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, I see the merit in having one direct role where you get really deep into an area.
Yeah.
I guess at this point in my career, having worked in different industries across financial services, government, academia, I'm really enjoying the flexibility of what I do and being able to jump in and help people from different domains and continually learn myself. I love that flexibility and variety in my work. And one day could be, delivering a training course. Another day I'm sitting on an advisory board speaking, to someone about explainability or ethics, with my peers. And then some other day could be, consulting on some large project with some, huge complexities that are, fascinating and challenging for me. So for now, I'm enjoying that. I'm making the most of that, but we'll see where the future takes us.
Yeah, I think, well, good luck to you. And you present very well as well, Alex. So when I saw your profile, I thought we've got to at least reach out to you. I do have it in line. We're going to do a bit of a webinar series as well. So hopefully we'll have you on and hopefully a bit more engagement, particularly from certain market verticals, I think would be interesting and more of a learning exercise as well. So, absolute pleasure and very good introduction to the work that you do. So on that note, we'll finish on the top of the hour. Dr. Alex Antic, the strategic data science expert on what executives need to know about AI. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll let you go.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, all the best. Okay, and just to finish off today, top of the hour, went longer than what I thought. Two very interesting gents. And closing off the report of the day. This was Datto's Global State of the MSP report. Managed service providers, 93% believe now is a good time to be an MSP. 52% have been in business between 6 and 11 years, and 34% said that competition is their biggest challenge. Quite an interesting report. This comes out every year. And then just finishing off MSPs, and they're building their security expertise. Just on the stats there, co-managed security tools, 67%, partnering with an MSSP, higher internet security talent, about 50%. They're all around that 50% mark. Contract consulting security experts, partnering with a MDR, which will be managed disaster response, and then education of internet talent pools. MSPs are always one of those. You're going to make sure that they have the right security settings that and skill sets for your particular business. Otherwise, you're paying them for nothing, or you won't realise it until it's all too late. So that's the report of the day. Also, from the Talisman Sabre firepower demonstration and the Patriot missiles, those videos are now available on MySecTV. So check them out. They're all edited down just to a few minutes each. And we'll be back on Friday morning at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time with Oleg Vornik, the CEO of Drone Shield, and their second quarter 21 record results. It's an ASX listed company, and we'll also have our second guest organised by then as well. And finally, tomorrow, Manoj Kumar and the Secure ID, Identity Transformed, will be released on MySecTV, and also his 12-minute interview. So that's it from the marketplace. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.